while Nigel Farage may well win his seat, that's also not a given. So I think there will be an attempt from the Conservatives over the next couple of weeks to try and wrestle that narrative back, but it will be hard if their party loses the plot.
Kate, how do we expect the Conservatives to respond to this? They seem to be so caught up with the reform drama since Nigel Farage returned as leader, and they've obviously been doing well in some polls, moving ahead of the Conservatives in one poll last week. What would the Conservatives try to do about reform now?
I think it's a really interesting question, and it goes back partly to that story on the front page of the Times today, which is less about the fact that there are people pushing for Sunak to be more personal and more about the fact that the party is clearly starting to panic. I think the risk for the Tories now is that is what sets in, that among the grassroots, among MPs, this panic about the polls, but also about reform takes hold. And what you start to see is the Tories infighting about who's going to be the next leader. And they start to over-focus on the role of Nigel Farage in all of that. Over the weekend, we've seen a significant effort from Robert Jenrick and David Davis on Times Radio on Sunday, pushing away this idea that Nigel Farage is the answer. And I think we'll see more of that, really engaging with reform and trying to push back this idea that that's where the future of the Tories lies. The reality is that even if there is this crossover moment in one poll for reform where they overtake the Conservatives, they won't get anywhere near the number of seats that the Tories will because of the voting system we have in this country. And while Nigel Farage may well win his seat, that's also not a given. So I think there will be an attempt from the Conservatives over the next couple of weeks to try and wrestle that narrative back, but it will be hard if their party loses the plot.
Labour talking about green jobs today and forging closer ties with the EU on carbon tax. What are they talking about?
Yeah, this might sound not very exciting to listeners, but trust me, it is, because this is Rachel Reeves, the potential next Chancellor of the country, if everything goes to plan for the Labour Party, really opening up the door to some pretty significant changes, I think, at least in the way that the government thinks regarding the European Union. What Rachel Reeves is talking about is essentially better deals for the UK and the EU. Now, she started by talking about chemicals, about chemical regulations, and she actually says in this interview, which is with the Financial Times, well, look, nobody voted when they were thinking about leaving the EU on chemical regulations, and she's probably right. But what I think she's starting to do is lay the groundwork for a rethink, a change in the relationship between the UK and the European Union. And this is quite, well, it's risky territory for Labour, if we're honest, because there are those in this election who want to say that Labour would open the door to more migration from the EU, maybe even to trying to soften the relationship between the two sides, which those who voted Brexit would not like at all. So it's the start of that. It's a move towards Rachel Reeves' growth plan. She says that it would help promote growth. It would help grow the UK economy. And she may well be right. Economists can judge. But I think in terms of politics, that narrative is always going to be risky for Labour.
And what about those risks for Labour and how the Conservatives might respond? They're clearly trying to hammer the idea of floating a whole load of tax, areas of tax which the Labour Party hasn't ruled out changes on. Rishi Sunak, according to the front of the Times today, being urged by cabinet ministers and senior Tories to go for the jugular and launch more direct personal attacks against Sir Keir Starmer. I kind of feel most of the last 18 months, 2 years has been pretty personal attacks against Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. How many times have we listened to PMQs and thought, oh, that was maybe, quite a risky attack from the Prime Minister towards Starmer? Some of the things that Rishi Sunak has said about his record, for example, when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, have really been criticised for their tone and their nature in the past. So I don't think the Prime Minister is unwilling to go down the personal route. I wonder whether part of this is that the Tories recognise that actually most people are not afraid of Keir Starmer as a man or a politician. They generally think, when you look at research done by focus groups, and you've done loads of these, the words that come out are things like boring, a bit grey, not particularly exciting. The fact that the voters are not enthused about Starmer means that those kinds of attacks about warning about him, about the risk of him, may not necessarily work. That's not to say that they won't happen, though. Remember, we've still got 3 weeks of this campaign, and the Tories have still got quite a long way to go in terms of the messaging that they're using. I think the repetition of the tax thing is partly because they can see it's working, because Labour is having to talk about it in every interview it does, reiterate what Labour would or wouldn't do on tax. And you're going to see more of that in digital advertising and from Tory spokespeople. They also have one eye on the football mat. They know that while people are watching the Euros, the coverage is going to be taken up by that. So they don't really want to start trying to land new blows while people's attention is elsewhere. But, we've still got a fair way to go in this campaign.
And today we get the final manifesto, although for some reason they're saying it's not a
Don't
manifesto.
call it a manifesto.
It's a contract with the people. I seem to remember standing on a windy cliff top in Cornwall, watching David Cameron sign a contract with the people in 2010. So I think it's probably confirmation there's nothing new in politics. Let's bring in Mark Hutchings, who's a political reporter based in Cardiff, who's keeping an eye on this for. Hi, Mark.
Hi there.
Why Wales? Why do you think Reform are coming to Wales to launch their Not a Manifesto?
Well, it has proved some sort of fertile territory for the various incarnations of the parties that Nigel Farage has been part of over the years. And if you go back to the post-EU referendum in 2016, when Wales as a nation voted out, then in the following year in 2017, in what were the Welsh Assembly elections in 2017, UKIP picked up 7 seats. There was then a bit of a split, and the Brexit Party came on the scene. But between the UKIP and the Brexit Party, they had 7 Assembly members. They did largely fall out with each other, and they all lost their seats at the subsequent Senate election. But as I say, it's been seen as fertile territory and has been proved to be fertile territory in the past. Not the first time Nigel Farage will have gone to a post-industrial part of the South Wales valleys to try to chime in with people's concerns, and no doubt immigration will be raised as a concern that people in that area might be featuring on again.
And so they're doing it in Merthyr Tydfil. Paint a picture of the politics there for us, Mark.
Well, it is a Labour heartland, as I say, post-industrial town. You go back many years ago, it was actually bigger than Cardiff, but much has changed in the subsequent decades since then. It is one of the more deprived parts of South Wales. As a whole, voted to leave in the EU referendum. In terms of the makeup of the population, I think it's something like 97% of people living in Merthyr would have been born in the UK. So immigration, not necessarily a huge factor in the makeup of the population, but it is certainly something that people in various elections have raised as an issue, and it's something that Nigel Farage no doubt will be talking about. The other issue, of course, is that while across large parts of England it's been the Tory vote that Reform have been targeting, what the message I think will be from today in Merthyr is, well, look what a Labour government is doing in Wales, focusing on the NHS and education. I heard Nigel Farage this morning talking about the 20-mile-an-hour speed restrictions that have come in Wales and have proved divisive. So I think those are factors that he will be focusing on, saying, look, this is what Labour does when it is in power, trying to pick up those Labour votes across Wales. And I think particularly in areas like the old Red Wall seats as well, that the Tories won, but Labour would be hoping to win back. So Reform hoping to pick up seats there. All the other parties, of course, have said that, well, Nigel Farage has come along once again trying to pick up votes when it suits him.